All right, for today's video review, we're going to be taking a look at Masters of the Universe Origins Man-E Faces. This guy is one of my absolute favorite Masters of the Universe characters just because of how stupid his name is. Like the real bad pun of Man-E Faces, which we'll get into why he's named that in a little bit here. And also just, I don't know, I really like the look of him. He's got a really ridiculous garish color scheme. I think he's got a really neat sort of like robot-y spaceman aesthetic. But yeah, he's just a really nice looking figure overall. He's part of Wave 2 of Masters of the Universe Origins, which was infamously like had really bad distribution and was kind of hard to find. So he's actually like one of the harder Origins figures to track down. Thankfully, there have been restocks of them since, but only on like online retailers. So like, good luck ever finding this guy in the stores. It was like, I never saw Wave 2 in stores at all. And thankfully I was able to get him on Big Bad Toy Store after the fact. But like Wave 2 had some really cool characters in it and was just kind of hard to track down. But yeah, I'm thankful that I finally got him. Here he is with He-Man and Skeletor, just so you can see what he looks like with the two main guys there. Here he is with Masterverse He-Man, so you can see how that size works out, who's obviously quite a bit taller there. Here he is with a deluxe Transformer, Sideswipe, and a pop vinyl, just for some standard size comparisons. And then last but not least, here he is with his wave mates Orko and Scareglow and Trapjaw here, just so you can see what he looks like with all of Wave 2. And yeah, this might be some of the reason that Wave 2 was so hard to find, like apart from just like bad distribution, is that all four characters in Wave 2 were just really cool. Like I like all of these figures a lot. So it makes sense why they'd be a bit more sought after and bought up. But it does kind of suck that these were so hard to find for a while. But yeah, you can also see he shares some parts here with Trapjaw, mainly the legs here. The arms at first I thought, like, I know the shoulder piece is obviously a different part, but I thought that the lower arm was the same part, but it's actually not. Like the hands are different, and like though they look very similar in sculpting, there seem to be different parts. Like it seems to be like proportionally slightly thicker on many faces. But yeah, the legs are definitely the same, which is, a typical thing with the Origins line and, the Vintage line as well, is that they reuse a lot of parts between characters, which is fine. It makes sense. It means that they can release a lot more characters and already have the budget for, making the parts and stuff like that. In terms of articulation, his arms here, they're on a swivel. They're at a bit of an angle, which is also the case with the other figures, but it gets in the way a bit more with Man-E Faces just because of his big dome head, whereas like with He-Man, you can kind of get the arm out of the way of the head. Like it's still that same joint, because like something that I haven't mentioned about this line previously is that all the like a lot of the joints are kind of interchangeable, so you can take them out and swap body parts and stuff like that. So you can see, get this off. Like if you look at the joint on the inside here, it's pretty much at the same angle. Like his might be a little bit more of like an acute angle, but it's not too different. But because he's got that big dome head there, like it does mean that the arms, he can't, it's like it moves at some kind of weird angles, and if you're just like moving it like this, like his arm just like bumps into his head really really quickly. But yeah, you can do stuff like that, or you can give him a He-Man's arm or whatever, and just like the shape of his bicep too, like you can see the He-Man arm is able to like sit closer to the body, whereas his arms are always a little bit splayed out to the side. But it works well enough there. So yeah, it's got that basically universal joint where the peg is on a bit of an angle, but it can also tilt up and down like that. It's got a bicep swivel, bend at the elbow about 90 degrees, a wrist swivel, and then also that joint where you can bend it back and forth. He comes with a little gun here that he can put in that one hand that has the holding stuff sculpt, and then the other one is just an open hand. He's got a nice waist cut. The hips are on ball joints, so you can rotate them forward, rotate them back a little bit, rotate them out to the side. He's got a cut just like at the knee basically, which acts as a thigh swivel. Yeah, not too deep a knee bend. He's got that boot cut, which kind of breaks up the sculpting, but not too terribly. It just, it kind of makes these little nubs that are sticking out of his shin not in line with each other, but whatever. Still looks relatively robot-y, so it's not too big a deal. And then his feet, just because they're in this little like boot kind of. They don't have like a tremendous amount of movement. Like you can kind of wiggle them from side to side, but like you're not really getting a ton of meaningful tilt in either direction or rotation. It's just like adjusting it very, very slightly. So for all intents and purposes, he doesn't really have a ton of foot articulation, but he looks pretty good just standing in a normal pose anyway. And then lastly, which is this is the big deal with his head articulation, is that he actually has a head swivel that is separate from his gimmick. So you can actually rotate his head side to side regardless of which face you have facing outward. And yeah, to activate that, he's got this little knob up here that you can spin to give him his robot face or his monster face or his human face. And that's why he's called Many Faces, because he's got many faces. Such a bad pun. I love it so much. But yeah, no, it's cool that they were able to kind of contain this within like the head so that he could still have that separate head articulation. Like, it breaks up the sculpt and the paint here a little bit with that pig bit, but I think that works relatively well. Worth noting is like for a while, like first of all, this only really works in one direction. Like you can turn it the other way, but it's a lot harder. So like this is a lot easier. But for a while, like when I was messing with this guy, like I don't know what changed inside the mechanism or whatever, but like I had a really hard time actually turning this. Like I literally at one point had to get like pliers with like a cloth over it so it wouldn't scratch it up to like actually get it to turn. And since then it's loosened up, but like I'm not entirely sure how the mechanism works in there, because like I figured you just have to push it down a little bit and rotate it. Now I don't even really have to push it down, and before I like wasn't even able to turn it while pushing it down. So I'm not entirely sure what's going on in there, but like just know that that might take a bit of fiddling to get like totally working. But it's a pretty fun mechanism if you have it actually working. It's a little squeaky, but I love his the sculpts of all three of his different faces there. But yeah, I mean, overall, other than that, there's not really a ton to say about the guy. Like, ultimately, he's just like one of those designs that I think is just so garish and like dumb looking that is one of my absolute favorites from the Masters of the Universe line. Just because like the weird aesthetic of like this clearly like robot man, but also he's got like visible abs and pecs. So it's just like a weird design. And then his human skin is kind of oddly orange too, and like the color matching isn't perfect between like this part, which is like that color plastic, and then on his arms, which is blue plastic and painted. It looks maybe a little bit better in person than it does on camera, but it's not absolutely perfect, especially since like the plastic itself is a bit more matte, whereas the paint has a bit more of a shine to it, which makes it look a little bit different too. But ultimately, I think it works relatively well. But yeah, not really a ton else to say about this guy. I mean, apart from the head gimmick, he's a pretty typical, Origins figure and just a typical action figure in general. So yeah, not really a ton to say about the guy. I really like him, and he's one of my favorite Origins figures just based on his looks alone. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and consider subscribing. I do reviews every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. And without further ado, here we have Masters of the Universe Origins Man-E Faces.